Sometimes the best way to learn mixing isn't from a tutorial, it's watching someone else wrestle with their decisions. Hey, it's Marcus from Holosuite. I'm doing something a little different today. This is a full one-on-one mix session that I did with one of my students. Before the call, I remixed their song from scratch, and then in the session, I walked them through all of my decisions and why I made them. A lot of what I talk about in this video isn't stuff that I cover in my other videos, so I think there's a lot of great insights to be taken from it. My client has been very gracious in allowing me to share this with you, but they have asked that I keep them anonymous. Their song hasn't been released yet, but when it does, I'll share the link in the description. And although this was a 1-hour session, I've edited it slightly for the sake of flow. If you like what you see in this video and you'd like to book your own one-on-one mix session with me, you can head to holosuitemastering.com/coaching. All right, let's get on to the good bit. What I thought I'd do, last time I basically started from scratch. But this time I have kind of pre-done the mix, and I thought I might just kind of go backwards, walk through what I did beat by beat. So the original one that you made is this one, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll let it kind of play through till we get to the, might stretch this out a bit. This is what I've come up with in the kind of hour or so I spent on it. There's yours. This is mine. Yours feels a bit kind of bassier and warmer. Mine's a little bit more open. And I did towards the end of my mix start kind of fiddling around to try and give back a little bit of warmth. But the first thing I noticed when I compare back to yours is that the pad in yours is kind of buried very deep.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Whereas I've kind of brought it up quite a lot. And I think
it sounds a lot more open. It sounds nice. Yeah.
And obviously it's a multi-stage process. So as I was getting towards the end of it, I'm like, it still needs a little bit more kind of mid-range. But after I'd kind of carved everything out a space, then you have to start kind of filling it back in again, which is what I tend to do. I actually did a mix the other day for one of my own tracks, which has a similar kind of vibe to this, very noisy, quite dense. And I found myself doing the same thing, kind of hollowing things out and then being like, oh no, this needs more warmth, and then kind of throwing it back in again. So let's go through them one by one. So for the basses, I don't think I did much of anything. Let's have a look. Yeah, I don't think I touched these at all. I really like the sub and this one are nicely laid in such a way that they don't really interact with each other. This one kind of carries the top end and is an octave up, and this one obviously being an octave down. They just kind of sit nicely on top of each other. And I could see that they're pretty nicely down the middle, where we could actually probably even spread that out a little bit if we wanted to add a bit more warmth. The verb, I didn't really touch.
Yeah, it just makes it a little bit wider.
This is another situation where, I think if I did a blind A/B, this might be one of those ones where it's like, is this helping or is this hindering? So this would be one of those ones where if I was having difficulty getting things to sit nicely in the mids, this would be one of the ones that I checked. I do like, though, because once again, these are going straight down the middle and this one is a little bit wider, I think.
Yeah, so I wanted to give that first bass some kind of dimensionality and make it a little bit,
cool. Yeah.
A bit more verbal, I guess. But
yeah. Cool. I get it. So that's the bass. That was pretty simple. The guitars, I think I did a lot more work on. So if I just go to So there's a couple of things I've done here. I'm just going to start looking at the individual ones to see whether I mess around with these. Okay, so for this one, One of the things I noticed, because I've got Pro Q4 up here, when I pulled up the collision detector, I noticed that it was clashing a little bit with the bass, that the low note of this one was clashing a little bit with this bass. So they're basically playing the same note. So my first thought was, I will cut out that area, but I found that the guitar kind of lost its edge when I cut that. So there was some kind of body in the guitar that was being lost when I did it. So instead, I emphasized the kind of the fundamental, the most important area of the guitar instead, which is, it's not ideal. It would be great if it wasn't kind of colliding with that bass, but this at least allows it to kind of pop out where it matters. So it's pretty subtle, but it just gives it a little bit more. Just helps it pop out a little bit more. It's also, because it's kind of pumping in that area too, it gives it a little bit, perhaps adds to the dynamics of that. Yeah. So that was very gentle. What else did I do? The parallel compression one. So this is another one like I did with your previous mix, where I was like, I don't know if this is necessarily adding a lot to the mix, but I think I could have like a good purpose for it. So if I play just this one. So this is the original. Oh, it's very quiet. But basically, yeah, it's just like a compressed version of the original, right?
Yeah, it's like heavily compressed. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought what I'll do is the same kind of trick I did in your previous mix, where I added some distortion. This is a reactor distortion plugin. It's like a kind of like a guitar cabinet, but like a really dirty guitar cabinet sound. So I added that, and then I added a bit of an exciter to overemphasize the top end. It's pretty subtle. But basically what this becomes then is, because it's a copy of the original layer, to give it that kind of differentiation and also add some dimensionality to the some kind of extra texture to the guitar to help it pop out a little bit more. It's now basically like an extra top end, like a boost to the top end. So if I do that now, so it's really subtle, particularly when it gets a bit louder. Just adds a little bit more fizzle to the top end of the guitar and helps it to pop out more. And that's, once again, just me kind of reaching for a bit more of the highs in the track, like trying to find some way to use the highs to kind of help differentiate things and add more space and etc. So that was useful. This one... So one of the reasons why I think particularly my mix is different to your mix is because when I walk into these mixes, I'll try and find like, what are the most basic elements of this mix that give the song what it is. And I think particularly when we're thinking about the kind of the atmosphere, the ambience of the track, this crystallizer version of the guitar track feels like it's really good at filling out that kind of area in the sides. And so more so than the black hole and stuff like that you've used. I feel like this one really just had the right kind of tone to it, and it filled out the sides in just the right way. So I brought it up a little bit. So I added, rather than mess around with the fades, I decided to just add this. It's just a gain plugin, basically. This is it's just like a free gain plugin. I like to do this when I want to add a lot of gain. So in this case, it's 6 dB, because in its stock form, adding 6 dB would have basically brought it all the way up to the top of the fader. So I've added that just as a plugin, and that way I've got more fine control over how much I can add or remove later on. And I think that's basically all I did with it, because I think I really liked the way that you kind of, it's this kind of nice pocket of the EQ spectrum, but just adding that little bit of extra gain Just added, yeah, it kind of added some fullness to the sides. This is one where it's like, I can make some use of this, even though you may have devised it as something to kind of support your guitar, it can actually become its own thing. And this is one of the things I do a lot when I record too, is because I process things over and over and over again. Sometimes I actually prefer the processed version to the original one. And so the original one becomes the support of the processed version. Yeah. I don't think I removed anything from this mix because I think that everything does contribute to that kind of warmness, and as long as it's not causing any particular issues, I've left it in. So I've included that, and because they're all kind of bunched together under this mix bus, then I was able to basically just treat them as their own instrument. So the guitars, the total mix bus. Oh, sorry, that's the imager. That's Pro Q4, isn't it? So I basically just did the same thing, tried to cut a bit of the bass out and tried to re-emphasize this area here. And I should note I did this first and then I went in and adjusted everything else after this. So this is like the kind of main vibe adjustment where I'm like, okay, it's starting to sound good. Can I push this further? Because obviously I don't want to mess around too much with the EQ just for this because it just gets too tricky. It's much easier to just go into the individual parts. So yeah, the result then is you get a little bit more texture to that guitar. And then I think I did make it slightly wider. Very, very subtly wider. And I think that was because maybe the pad, as we'll get to in a second, I think the pad might be something that I brought a little bit closer to the center. I brought something else closer to the center, and I thought the guitars might belong just a little bit further out, particularly this crystallizer one. Yeah, that crystallizer, because it's so nice in the sides, I wanted to try and keep that as wide as I could. So the pads, let's have a look here. So the first thing, obviously, I raised them up quite a bit because I thought they wanted to have their own place in the mix. So what did I do here? Okay. So there's a few things. The first thing, I raised up the volume by 16 dB, so it's like a real huge boost. So yeah, it was significantly quieter before. I don't think I didn't EQ it at all. I didn't EQ it, but I did add an exciter, so just added a little bit more. So that's with it off. A bit more top end.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit more to play with. Are you familiar with this plugin?
Yeah, I use it a lot actually.
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah.
It's the only problem with it is it's very easy to overdo it. But one of my favorite things about it is the little EQ section at the bottom. It does some pretty cool kind of like very gentle kind of lo-fi stuff. So if I overdo it with my exciter, I can tame it a little bit, and you've got a couple of different curves to do it as well. I really like that. I messed around with this section a little bit, the tone section, to try and get it just to kind of sculpt the tone the right way. But the other thing I really like is the reverb, particularly because it's really easy to EQ it. So I've added just a little bit of extra reverb. And I haven't gain matched this, so I'm not sure exactly whether it's really helping, but I wanted to try and get a little bit more. One of the things I like to do with reverb, especially when I'm mastering, is that if you make the reverb bright enough and you kind of restrict it to that kind of top end or closer to the like upper mids to the top end, you can use it as a way to kind of game a little extra top end out of your audio, particularly if it's like a shimmer or something like that. You have to be careful of it with shimmer reverbs. But so my plan was with this one was to try and like get a little bit more top end without fussing with it too much with like exciter, because exciter, obviously you overdo it and it distorts. So I wanted to try and get a little bit extra, and I did add this kind of speaker emulation thing here. Also, it adds more air, so to speak, because it also brings it slightly further out. So that's why I thought it might be useful. I don't use this in a lot of mixes unless I really want to kind of lo-fi the shit out of things, as you'll know. Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff.
And so I understand. I think the air module, how it adds some high end, but how does the reverb itself
Uh,
contribute to that high end?
so basically, because it's feeding back the high end from here, the feedback itself causes like a slight
Oh,
increase.
okay. All
So
right.
the
Yeah,
air
yeah.
itself, I don't know if let me check actually, because I don't know how much the air is doing. Okay. It's hard to tell because of the volume jump.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just wanted to add a little bit more kind of grit to it
Mm-hmm.
while I
Mm-hmm.
was putting it. But the point of it was the space module, not the air module.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and once again, as somebody who really likes to gain match everything, this one's a bit tricky because there's no way to tell whether
Yeah.
I've just added volume or not. But it worked for me because I messed around. I had Pro R2 as well, the Fab Filter one, and I messed around with that a bit, and it just wasn't giving me the top end I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
this seemed to do the job. Anyway, so that was the purpose of this, was just to kind of add a little bit to
Yeah.
try and
Okay.
find some more top end, give it a bit more of like an ethereal vibe without having to overuse Exciter.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then I also widen this slightly too. If I So it's quite concentrated. Now it's out a little bit further. Kind of spreads things out. So that's just on here. But I think if I go into, there might be, let's have a look. So this one, just let me walk my way through this one because I'm trying to remember what I did. I think this might be, so this is the tremolo one,
Mhm.
and I really like that effect, but I also wanted to cut through more. I felt like, particularly when you've got something that has movement or something like that, if you're dealing with like a relatively static mix, then having anything with movement cut through really adds a lot more kind of fun to things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So uh, this was great, but I was like, needs more something.
Yeah.
So particularly that top end. So
Mm-hmm.
what I've done, Exciter again, and I really pushed it. Like this is maxed out.
Yeah.
So I have tried to emphasize an area where there basically wasn't any frequency content. One of the things that I do in my audio course, which is really fun, is showing how when you EQ, you can add a boost to an area where there doesn't appear to be any frequency content, or there's not really much frequency content,
Mm-hmm.
and you can still get an appreciable difference. It's very, very subtle, but the idea of doing it when there's not really actually anything. So I mean, you can barely see anything here, but the stacked effect
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is it helps out.
If
So
you solo that band, could,
this one here.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. So if I'll turn off the latter
Mm-hmm.
distortion there.
Mm. Yeah.
So there is something there. But yeah, it's obviously at the very tail end. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so the basic idea was like if I boost this up and then add something else to it, the cumulative effect will
Mm-hmm.
make it significant enough. So this is in Reactor. It is some kind of distortion thing. It has a switch called Punish, which is pretty cool when you turn that on. If I just turn this on now, if I get it to. Oh man, I must have had something turned up further before because it went absolutely ballistic and started like resonating and stuff when I pressed it. So I don't
Yeah.
know what it's based on, But this is just like a pretty good like overdrive distortion.
Okay.
And it was just did just the job to kind of crisp it up, give it a bit more texture, and kind of help it cut through. And it's still not like super cutting through the mix. We could probably push it a bit further. But it's getting there. Must have turned it down a bit because maybe I was kind of going back and forth. I might just, while I'm here. Anyway, yeah, we could afford to push it. My thought when I was hearing this, I'm like, this would be really fun if this was like taking over the whole mix at some point.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, just a thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just like with the guitars and just like with what I did in my previous mix, a lot of what I'm doing here is just trying to be like always trying to avoid adding volume. I'm not trying to mess with the volume too much. One of the ways that we very easily get lost in our mixes, you were saying before about like A-Bing it and being like, oh God, what have I done? Trying to keep the volume as constant as possible is a really good way to keep your level of objectivity, because obviously things getting louder, they always sound better. One of the easiest ways to do this is to try and, when you start the mix, you go through and you listen to everything and be like, does everything feel like it has its own place? Is everything feeling loud enough? And then once you've kind of set those levels, and I usually set those levels at the kind of trim, usually like the internal gain of like the clip, or I do what I did with like that BC gain. I use these to kind of set my levels the first time. And that way, when something starts getting too loud in the mix, we know it's because of the processing. So you can kind of bring it back down again. Like it kind of helps you to go back and forth. But also, it's like one less variable when you're messing with things. So if we know that everything's at a good relative level, but they're still competing with each other in the mix, then the next step we go from there is like, okay, so the volume itself is not the problem. Because I know if I turn it up that it feels too loud. If I know that if I turn it down, it doesn't feel loud enough. So the problem that it's occurring is an interaction between this and another layer in the mix. Usually in ambient music, it's EQ based. Sometimes it could be dynamic based, but it means that if we then go to the EQ and we use that to solve the problem and obviously try and compensate for the changes in volume. So the reason why we use EQ is to solve issues between layers in a mix that can't be fixed by just raising or lowering the volume, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do through here, is to try and keep things as constant as possible, and then just focusing on the EQ, try and let that be the solution rather than raising and lowering the volume, because then when the more that we mess with that balance, the easier it is for things to just kind of get away from you. And it's even happened to me, as I said, like I also kind of start losing sight, and then I go back to the reference and I'm like, oh, it's still like I feel like I've sucked out the mids somehow. But yeah. Anyway, okay, so that's the pads. The next one, which I've dubbed noise. So I don't think I've touched this one a whole lot. Oh yeah, that's still my stock thing, so I haven't touched that. Let's see whether I touched any of these. I'm pretty sure I did touch this one. And this is the only one where I was just like, this might be one of the ones where I try and bring back some of the lower frequencies to kind of restore that. But my first thought was like that area, these kind of the mids here around 500 hertz is already very crowded. And that's also where a lot of the power of that crystalline guitar probably is coming from.
Yeah.
So my thought was try and cut that out a little bit. And obviously the thing with noise in general is that because it's so broadband, it interacts with everything in the mix pretty much. So it was just an attempt. Like I liked what it was doing, but my first thought was like, can I just get it to pull back a little bit? I just yeah, I might just leave that off. So I also narrowed this a little bit. Yeah, actually, I think you did a good job of where you put that. So I'm just going to turn off all that stuff. This is kind of the area where I started to get towards the end of my time. So I did like these kind of little popping noises. So there's the cassette noise. Are these, did you record these yourself or is this like a
Yeah.
sample?
No, it's something I recorded with like it's like a Philips. I don't know if it looks familiar, but it's like an old Philips
Oh yeah, yeah,
setup. Yeah.
that does
So
look
it's a
pretty
lot of fun.
familiar. Yeah. I think I probably had one or two of those in Japan or I knew
Yeah.
someone who did. Yeah. Yeah, cool. So I do like what's going on here. And my thought was, particularly for this, is that like there's definitely some scope to have these kind of pop through a little bit more. And I think the best way to do that, considering how dense the rest of the mix is, would be to do a little bit of sidechain or something like that to kind of have
Hmm.
it pop out.
Hmm.
The other thing, I guess, this is just my opinion too, is that when we've got a lot of things happening in the mix like this, we don't want too many things happening at the same time, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So obviously it's fun to have like the all the textures and stuff happening. Are you familiar with Burial?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
so
it. Yeah.
yeah, because Burial uses a lot of this kind of, vinyl crackle and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
he uses that in sections of his songs where there's not a lot else going on. And so it means we don't have to do any kind of creative trickery to get the
Yeah. Yeah.
texture to flow through. It's really good in a very kind of minimal part of the song. So like at the beginning or at the end or some kind of anticlimactic part of the song is a good time to bring out more textures. And
Yeah.
obviously and you do have like a lot of layers of different noise and stuff and I think they're all really fun, but for a good clean mix and also to add some more variety to your tracks, these are the kinds of things where you can almost like block out areas where it's like, okay, this is where I'm going to use this kind of noise and this is where I'm going to use this kind of noise. And you can obviously build them up to some kind of climax where
Hmm.
they're all in there, but with the understanding that the more things that you put in, the harder it is for everything to have a place.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's the part I was lost with a little bit, which I think I also wrote that to you in the email, right? Where it's funny because all of these effects are pretty subliminal. They're definitely not like the main focus or anything, but I
Hmm.
spent more time on them than on like the main elements of the mix because yeah, they feel a little bit disjointed from the rest of the mix, I guess. And then maybe I think I also just had, yeah, like you said, a bit too much going on where I
Yeah.
wanted that variety and that like textural interest. But maybe, like you say, maybe
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
it's a fair comment. Yeah.
yeah, and look, obviously, like some of this comes with time. Like I found actually over time that a lot of this stuff is now really instinctive for me, and I still do have difficulty. But this track I made the other day, within about two or three layers, I think I'd already gotten what I wanted, and
Hmm.
I did end up, I think, adding one more, and that it added exponential difficulty to my mix to try and
Hmm.
get it all to work properly. And I think I've got it in now. But basically, I have an instrument where I had already, years ago, built it up with just the right layers of distortion or whatever that I like. And I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, cool. I know what to do with this. And so it conveyed, like, it carried a lot of the texture. It also carried a little bit of the kind of tone and stuff that I wanted. And so I made two layers of that were kind of playing complementary notes on either
Hmm.
side of the stereo field. And then I think I added a little bit more. I added like a kind of a shimmer thing that was much less noisy.
Hmm.
And that was kind of it because just wrestling with that noisy synth, like trying to get it to sit nicely, was so much effort.
Yeah.
And I thought like I'm so glad I didn't add too many extra things, but the totality of that was this immense kind of wall of sound. Like it's these days when I want to include noise or something like that, I kind of package it into whatever I'm doing because a lot of
Hmm.
the instruments I have some kind of like noise in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that becomes the texture. And then it means that I don't have to worry too much about adding other stuff. And sometimes when I feel like I've kind of played out the texture too much in one track, I might kind of go for something a bit softer,
Hmm.
um, and actually add a bit of tape crackle or something. But even then,
Yeah.
I always tend to want to run my tape crackle through something that's going to distort the hell out of it. Like I have a very
Yeah.
specific thing. But anyway, I try to kind of package everything in together so that by the end of it, my mix has got only a few layers, and some of them are more difficult than others because I've baked in a lot of that stuff in
Hmm.
there. But the more practice you get, kind of getting something just noisy enough and realizing like that's the texture I need, and then I don't need
Hmm.
to add anything else. That's uh, a a step towards kind of making your mixes simpler, but keeping the same kind of vibe that you want, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So, and I'll just double check. Did I do anything to the black hole? So I think I let that as is because it's very subtle. I think it probably adds a little bit to yeah, it adds a little bit to the pads. And then up the top here, I went back and forth quite a lot with this fuzz one because I think it's most focused on the guitar.
Hmm.
So let's see, what did I do to it? It must have been pretty subtle. Or maybe I just turned it off completely. Oh yeah. I don't know if you've seen the Swiss saturator. This is one of those,
No. No.
but it adds some pretty gnarly harmonics. But I wanted this to kind of help the guitar along, um, in part of the frequency spectrum where the guitar felt a little bit lacking. So I went back and
Yeah.
forth a bit. Let's just see what I did, just because out of curiosity. So that's obviously way too loud. So I'm just gonna turn it down. Oh, it's actually not too bad. Adds a little bit, kind of beefs it up a little bit.
Hmm.
Probably don't need is that low though. Okay, that's not so bad. Okay, yeah, that's good. This is one where you could take or leave it because it's just an effect. It's just a background instrument. But
Hmm.
um, if I could find some way to manipulate it so that it supports the main instruments, even if there might be some masking happening, it's going to
Hmm.
help. And I think it's very easy to make things sound too clean. There's definitely something to be said about just vibe and the importance of
Yeah.
vibe in the track. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet is on the master bus. I think I actually ended up adding a little bit of a shelf in the top to try and reduce the top end again.
Okay.
Even though
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time bringing it back, I then thought it set a little bit too hi-fi.
Yeah.
This is to kind of compensate, to overemphasize this area, to kind of compensate for the loss in the top end, which is
Yeah.
something I like to do a lot. The only other thing that's probably worth mentioning in here is this one here. Are you familiar with the I think it's the
The LA
LA2A?
2A. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as I understand, they monitor the output of the compressor to decide how much compression to do, whereas usually the compressor will monitor the input, right? Whatever goes
Hmm.
into it,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is why these are tend to be more kind of leveling, I guess. They're much less sensitive than other compressors. So they work well as like a glue compressor as compared to one where, you know, particularly if you want to like tame peaks or something, like definitely you need much more sensitivity and fine control over what's happening. This one is much more of a kind of like throw it on and just get a little bit more vibe out of the track kind of thing. So that's why I've added this one, just because the guitar was popping out a little bit too much. So this kind of evens things out a bit. Still haven't got the gear perfectly. Just kind of glues things together a bit nicer and adds a bit more vibe. I've done a few small adjustments here. So if I bring this visualizer up, you can see what I've done here. So this is in the mid section. I just added a little bit more in the center here, and a little bit more presence. And yeah, let's see, what have I done? Where's the sides? I can't remember how this. Oh, here we go. The sides I barely touched. I think I just added like the tiniest little bit in the mids here. Just some vibe adjustments, I guess. That's pretty much it. I don't think I messed with much else. I've just got my friends Clarity and Gullfoss adding a little bit. Just a little bit extra. It doesn't usually do a lot, but it's one of the reasons why I like Clarity and Gullfoss Master is because, whoa, I don't know what I was doing there, but it's using a reference which is, I think, like, I don't know if it's like pink noise or something like that, but it uses like some kind of standard reference, so it's better than my ears at telling whether things are balanced well in terms of EQ. So it will start pulling things up where I might have forgotten, or will start pulling them down where I just couldn't hear. So it's like like having a second set of ears being like, I think you might have overbaked it a little bit in the at 2K there. So and I usually make them pretty subtle. Yeah, so that's basically it. I didn't use a limiter. It's like it's engaged, but it's not. It's like well below. I could probably even raise it up a few dB there. So the one thing that I would do if I went back is I like how everything feels quite glued around the guitar in your one. Whereas in mine, there's a lot more happening. So obviously that's a choice, like, or it could be a choice, you know, if I was to do this again and you were to say, like, I really want the guitar to be the focal part, then it would make it a lot easier to kind of glue things around that. It really is obviously just like about what you want to emphasize in the mix and how you do that. But my philosophy is always like, if the part's in the mix and it feels like it wants to have its space, I will give it its space, right? Which is why my mixes tend to be kind of more wider, expansive area. Everything kind of feels like it has a place, but that's how I roll. But it's perfectly legitimate to just be like, I want this guitar to be like the focal thing. But having said that, if we want the guitar to be the focal thing, then we also need to think about how we structure everything else around that to kind of support that. Obviously, if you pass it on to me and I find stuff, I'm like, oh, that's funny. Like, it feels like that should come up. Anyway. If you've made it this far in the video, nice work. I hope you pulled some useful nuggets from this session. Why don't you comment "made it" as your badge of honor and let me know your favorite insights from this video. And once again, if you like what you saw in this video and you'd like to book your own one-to-one session with me, head to holosuitemastering.com/coaching. And if you're in the mood for some more long-form content, why not check out this video where I master an entire track start to finish. Until next time, keep making music. Cheers.